Hello and welcome to episode number 38 of your Bamboo Chalupa digital marketing podcast. My name is Brett Snyder. I am the founder of Knucklepuck, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nate Shiver, the author of shiverweb.com.
Hello, hello.
So today we're going to be talking about a topic that has been, frankly, a pretty consistent theme throughout the entire run of Bamboo Chalupa. And that comes down to this idea of language. We've harped on keyword research and the importance of understanding the needs and wants of your audience, but today we want to talk about specifically how the evolution of semantic language has started to impact the way that not only search engines evaluate pages for ranking, but also how marketers have had to evolve to adapt to this new world of semantic search.
Yeah, and the term semantic search, I think it sounds like an academic exercise, but it's really as simple as looking at what words mean and how that relates to how people search. And this has been a dream of search engineers for years and years. And it's one of those things that was coming around the bend until all of a sudden it was what ran the Google search engine. I think most SEOs will remember back in 2013, Google launched the Hummingbird algorithm that completely, they said they swapped out the engine of their search engine. And Hummingbird, it really tries to look at what users mean when they search rather than just what they say.
I think that's an important distinction there, because I think a lot of times people think about that as being exactly the same. It's like, well, of course that they're trying to do what people mean as opposed to what they say. But then you get into the understanding of how important context is. One of the examples I know I use all the time is if you're talking about white vans, that's going to be a very different conversation if you're my grandmother, who may, look to be able to take the white vans to mass on Sunday, or you talk to my cousin who is into skateboarding and looks at white vans as the sneaker. There are different ways that the same words, that what somebody says can mean something very different depending on their context. And to Nate's point, this is something that all the search engines have really been striving to do from the very beginning. Not to say that they have been as evolved or as successful at it when Google and Yahoo and Bing go back to the days of Alta Vista and when we had to ask Jeeves to tell us where things were. Search engines have always tried to return results that is going to best align with what a user needs. And I think the really big switch in summer of 2013 and a continued investment by the major search engines here in 2016 is helping to really hone those semantic elements to zero in on what that user means rather than simply looking at the words that they say.
Yeah, and an example that I like to look at is the search hotels New York. Now, way back in the day before semantic search, Google would look through their index, through all the documents that were titled, hotels New York, that had that somewhere in the document and say that was relevant, and they would rank those. Well, now you might start to notice that if someone searches for hotels New York on a desktop computer in Atlanta, they might be planning a trip. And so they're going to mean something very different than someone who is at the JFK airport at 11 o'clock at night searching hotels New York on their phone. One person is going to be doing research. The other person is going to want to buy something. And so even though that's the exact same keyword, it has very, very different intent. And even though this might sound like an academic exercise and something we can just let the Google engineers handle, it has real implications for how we structure our marketing campaigns and how we structure our SEO campaigns.
And an example to kind of stay off of that is, depending on the focus of your site, it comes into recognizing what types of results that Google is even trying, the different types of varied results that they'll return, because that's going to impact how you invest your marketing dollars in terms of developing the appropriate amount of content. This idea of semantic search, as Nate mentioned, introduces different types of media. You may have videos, you may have images, you may have apps, you may have other hotel listings. There's a lot of different types of results. It's no longer your 10 blue links. We've been saying that for years. But semantic search has even taken it a step further to be able to say, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, we now have much more dynamic elements in the search results themselves. If they think that a user is looking for a simple one-and-done answer that Google can provide to them without ever leaving the search results. All of this kind of stays around that idea that Google wants to be able to keep you on their search engine. Obviously, we'll talk about Bing and Yahoo, kind of make our standard plea to not neglect the other search engines. But I know that we do it as well. We focus in on Google as the primary driver because then we see these updates like Hummingbird, which they, admitted was the largest algorithm change I think they've made in 10 years, I think they said. More than Penguin, more than Panda. Now, not to say that it didn't impact the same number of sites, but the gravity of the change and the way that they're trying to prepare themselves for, future success really pivoted when Hummingbird was released about almost 3 years ago.
Yeah, and this goes back to, we live in a inbound world, and Brett, you've mentioned on previous episodes that, we can't make people search for things that we want them to search for. We have to be present when they do, and that means not only being in front of the keywords that they're looking for, but also being in the places that Google is, in the environment that Google is creating. So when we talk about these different search results and the different types of media that Google's serving up, we have to make sure that we understand how and why Google's creating those search results and be there, or else we're not going to be getting any traffic at all.
Yeah, and the whole idea of inbound marketing has kind of been reflected in a shift in how users expect the experience on a search engine. They expect to be able to get exactly the results that they want. They expect that if they're going to see ads, those ads better be hyper-targeted to specifically the experience that they're having. They don't want to be interrupted with ads anymore. This idea of living in an inbound world and being able to market towards what you could argue is a more evolved, user base, you have to make sure that, you have to understand that these try to fit a square peg in a round hole campaigns or attempts are not going to work anymore, that they're actually going to compromise your brand from a user perspective. And because the search engines have evolved to the point where they are able to predict and infer that user intent, if you are providing a suboptimal experience for those users, it will directly impact your ranking potential in these search engines.
And when you talk about all these different factors, I mean, there's a laundry list. And I mean, some of the biggest include, devices. We've already mentioned, the person on their phone at JFK versus the person on their desktop at home. But there's also things like your previous search history. If you love a certain website, Google will see that. In fact, I've seen for a while, but in a lot of my searches, I notice how prevalent it is where you'll see a little snippet below the meta description where Google will say, you visited this website many times, or you last visited it here. And if Google sees that you go to the same website over and over, that's going to be more prominent. Same way with your Google Plus posts, your photos. Google will also look at your location. I think location is a huge factor, not just for regional service providers or people or businesses that are limited to a city, but also with local search trends and how, to your point about white vans. I mean, I've seen where products have these regional dialect shifts where Google will serve things, even if they're not directly related to a local business.
And I want to go back to kind of that reference to Google Plus, because I know you have a tendency to just drop Google Plus references in there as if people are using it, on a daily basis.
But they are.
They are.
They are.
And what I want to touch on here, and I think where I'm going with this, is people are using Google Plus whether or not you realize it. Since Google rewrote their privacy policy and brought everything under one umbrella, with one single privacy policy, your Google Plus page is your identity. When we talk about using Google Plus, it's not to say that you're posting to it, but it's to say that this is also your login for YouTube. So your search history on YouTube comes into play. This is also if you own a business or you frequent, you leave reviews, those are now tied to the same identity. So when we talk about this idea of personalization, we talk about, Nate mentioned it before when we were talking about hotels, where we talk about universal search results and different types of media. All of this depends not, on Google trying to predict and infer user intent, but trying to do it on an individual level. They use the information that they curate based on that consistent identity in your Google Plus profile to understand what you mean. Because again, even if we take the white vans, Nate and I could type that thinking the same thing, but maybe I want white vans because I think they look good with, a nice pair of jeans, and that's a style I go for, and Nate is actually a hardcore skateboarder. There are going to be different intents when you even are referring to the same product about what you need. And we're starting to get into kind of the deep subtleties of how semantic search, is starting to evolve, but also how powerful it can be. Because, and Google recognizes that given the investment that they've made in developing this technology.
Yeah, and in fact, they've been making a bigger investment in figuring out how to structure all these different entities in almost a separate, they call it a knowledge vault, separate algorithm. I mean, we did an entire episode on the knowledge graph. And even though the knowledge graph will display, we see the answer boxes and whatnot in search results, but Google is using that information to help parse and understand queries, especially the long tail queries where they've traditionally been not as reliable.
And when Nate's talking about some of the, the new patents and technologies that Google's trying to implement, one of the big ones in recent years is this idea of co-occurrence. And Bill Slawski wrote a tremendous article. He does a lot of research into Google patents, which we'll link to in the show notes. But wrote a tremendous article about how this idea of, looking at entities as search entities to predict probabilities of the relationship and better understand the relationship between them. There are actual, these are computer science and high level engineering that goes into being able to establish values for these different types of entities and then weight the relationships between or among these values. And so it's something where it does have a very scientific approach to it. Co-occurrence really at its, we can get all technical like that, or we can really boil it down to the fact that they want to see if words are being used in conjunction with one another very regularly, there's probably a deeper relationship there than just other words that aren't used as often. So they use tons and tons of different criteria to be able to, again, predict and infer user intent and match the search results with that user intent.
All right, so we've established that semantic search, it's not only important, it's also where Google's going. Let's dive into exactly how we can optimize for semantic search. And I'll kick it off by saying that, ironically, we're going to take the most old school method in SEO to start with semantic search, and that's keyword research. But I call it better keyword research or keyword research 2.0. I can't come up with a better term. But either way, it's an acknowledgement of the fact that keywords are still how people engage with search engines. So even though Google is trying to infer the meaning of keywords, people still use keywords. And that's sort of the common denominator between SEOs, websites, users, and Google. But the catch is that semantic search means that keywords mean more than they used to. And it's our job as SEOs, as marketers, to use keywords as the window into our customers' intent and try to figure out how we can match that. It's almost like trying to match someone through a mirror almost, where we're trying to match them on the other side, where keywords are sort of our keywords are the mirror.
Right. If you think about it, there has to be, and Nate kind of talked, there has to be a common denominator. There has to be a trigger or a catalyst. There has to be something that a user keys in to this machine for the machine to process results. And I think that's why, everybody wants to be, kind of hesitate to talk about keyword research as one of the fundamental aspects of SEO, or one of the most important aspects, because it's not the sexiest element. It's not something that you're going to go out there and be like, oh, but look at these, fancy medical knowledge graphs. I'm like, yeah, but those are processed entirely by Mayo Clinic. If you're not Mayo Clinic, that doesn't benefit you. It actually does quite the opposite. And so trying to focus on optimizing for some of these bleeding edge, even if we want to get into things like schema, you want to get into, different markups. People want to focus on the new hot trend, but really it comes back to the very core fundamental understanding of the fact that a user has to key in some value for the computer program to return results. And we can focus on the different types of results. We can focus on 15 different types of media, or kind of to Nate's point, we can circle right back up and focus entirely on identifying what values that user is keying in.
So for an example, let's suppose you have a garden website, and suppose that you want to target raised garden beds. Well, back in the old days, before semantic search, you would say, okay, well, we need a page about raised garden beds. And we're going to put raised garden beds in the title. We're going to put it in the content. We're going to repeat it a couple times and then try to get links to that page. Now that we're in sort of the world of semantic search, we have to not only look at the literal text raised garden beds, we have to look at the keyword, we have to look at the search results for that keyword, and we have to look at the modifiers, which are basically best raised garden beds, raised garden bed dimensions, any adjective or adverb or any kind of extra word that gets added onto that keyword.
Or even, even verbs.
Yeah,
Construct
even verbs.
a raised garden bed, remove raised garden bed.
Yeah.
There's going to be and people are going to be looking for very different results.
Very different results. And we have to take all the information, those four areas, and we have to look at them as a whole and say, okay, what does a person who is searching for raised garden beds really want to know? And how can we provide that information? If we look at, the search results for raised garden beds, and we look at the modifiers and we see very basic tutorials that cover, the dimensions, the materials, how to install it, we're going to say, okay, people are not looking to buy a raised garden bed kit. They want to know very, very granular information. And that's the kind of information that goes into semantic search. Google will say, okay, raised garden beds, we don't just need to find pages that have that in the document. We need to go out and find dimensions, materials, instructions, tutorial. We need to have pages that have video, that kind of thing.
We, as a search engine, need to learn. We need to learn what raised garden beds are, because how can we process results for them if we're not even really sure what they are? So we learn about the materials that go into it. We learn the types of plants that somebody would grow in a raised garden bed, or vegetables. I'm not sure. I haven't processed all the available information quite yet. We have to have a full and complete understanding of the different variations before we can start to, as we said before, assign probabilities and assign weights to those different types of results, and then use that to be able to kind of key back in and meet that other side of the mirror that the user is typing in.
And so, like we mentioned with the modifiers, one of the most common tools is Google Suggest. This is the old technique where you type in your keyword, you hit space, and you don't hit enter. And you see what is Google suggesting, go along with that term based on data that they have from previous searches. You can also do things like add wildcards or look at the modifier that goes before the word. And most usefully, there are tools that they may still go away at some point, but for now, there's tools like keywordtool.io, Ubersuggest, and then also specialized tools like Answer the Public that run that mine Google Suggest at scale, looking for questions, looking for all the modifiers throughout the alphabet, to give you a full picture of all the modifiers that Google is seeing go into this term.
And what you'll notice if you really start to critically look at Google Suggest, even not necessarily even in your professional searching, but even on your personal searching, you don't really get 7 or 8 synonyms in a row. Google Suggest is giving you alternative variations. They're not just going to give you the same option 5 times in a row. They want to be able to say, what are people searching for? You better believe that the clicks on Google Suggest listings and where they rank on Google Suggest has an impact on not only on the results, but also on the types of results that they'll position for more generic phrases, for what we'll call the root terms. The fact that this information, what I always tell people talking about Google Suggest, because you have a lot of them, and I think, Nate, you even wrote a pretty cool article about the different Google Suggest completions for different states. But people are like, why is Google returning this? Like, who is searching for this that Google's returning this suggested result? Well, somebody, and then, to be honest, a number of somebodies, because they're not just arbitrarily making this up. The results that come in Google Suggest are ones that are designed based on what people are searching for and a probability that Google believes this to be a legitimate completion of the root term or the head term that you've already typed in.
And even once you type in your main term, another window that you can get into the intent on keywords is, if you scroll down to the bottom, there will be a list of related searches. And there's a reason that these appear at the bottom. It's because this is how do people revise their search when the first one has failed. And this gives you a window into sort of the branches breaking off the main tree trunk of your main term. And this will give you an idea, again, of even if people don't like these first set of search results, they're looking for something different. They're looking for a certain angle. And the related searches down at the bottom will tell you exactly what those people are looking for.
And again, these related searches are coming directly from search activity that has taken place not only on the search engine, but on these particular keyword phrases. The amount of, and I think it's, even we as SEOs, I think sometimes take for granted just the wealth of information that a search engine is able to accumulate in the course of a day, in the course of a week. And then you look at years of trend data. The amount of information that is available is really quite astonishing. And the fact that these related searches are appearing is showing you that Google thinks that if you're not happy, if the results, the 10 results that they've already given you aren't correct, they still want to give you can almost think of these as the next 10 options. When you have an option now to click on a different term or refine your search. This is all pursuant to that goal that search engines want to keep you on their results page, and they want to provide you with the best information possible, even if that best information is a link to an alternative search.
And again, Google suggests and Google related searches, these are publicly available. I mean, any SEO, any competitor can go look at it. But if you want to start gathering your own information, you can look at, if you're running an AdWords campaign, you can go and look at the search terms report. Or if you have a page that's ranking for a certain query, you can go look in Search Console and look at the search query report. Both of these will give you the specific query that brought someone to your website and will give you an idea of, they came to my website via this query. I must already have something that they're looking for. And you can take that and run with it to continue to build out the content that you already have, or the landing page if you're running ad campaign. Or you can you can take that information to revise your current page or build off a new one.
And I think what's really, really exciting about the search terms report and the search query report, you're no longer playing with estimated data. This is not the data that your competitors have access to. This is not what Google infers or suggests that might be related to. These are actual queries that drove a visitor to your website. And if you're looking at something like the search query report, something that I tell people when I start to audit websites, especially in terms of kind of the keyword footprint that exists, look at the types of terms that are in that search query report. If you look at them and say none of these make sense, a lot of people say that and these don't make sense, they completely discount the report. When in reality, that should show you that Google does not think your site is relevant for the same content themes that you think your site is relevant for. It is unclear to Google what your site is about if you're seeing just a wide variety of random phrases in your search query report. Same thing with your search terms report in AdWords. If you can start looking at, there may be negative keywords that you don't want to be bidding for, but that will influence potential content campaigns if you know that people are looking for ripoff. Maybe they associate that with your brand. Maybe it's something you can say how to avoid a ripoff. If you know that you can try to get your own rankings in front of people who have a very different intent than somebody maybe looking for your brand name. Maybe somebody looking for quite the opposite. This gives you an opportunity. These search terms, these search query report, and I can't stress this enough about how important these reports are because they're your data. You have to take advantage of the information about yourself to improve yourself. There is no better information, and it's coming straight from the horse's mouth.
On the flip side, you can also steal competitors' data, or even if it's not direct competitors, you can steal search result competitor data, where you look at the terms that you want to get traffic from, where you think that you can create a relevant page, relevant website, and you look at the pages that are already doing well and try to figure out, okay, why does Google like them? Why are they there? And you can do this in a couple ways. You can take the pages that are already ranking and drop them into Keyword Planner. We'll evaluate that landing page, and what it will do, it will come up with ad groups. And a lot of people skip the ad groups and go straight to the keyword ideas. But I think the ad groups is really important because even though it's not directly related to the idea of an entity or a topic that organic search is looking at, it's very related because it's grouping what Keyword Planner thinks are very related terms into a broader topic. And when you look at the topics and the terms that appear under it, it can give you a better picture of what you should do with an organic page or even with an AdWords landing page to try to target that larger topic.
It's computer learning in action. You are able to optimize for computer learning because Google has now taken that and organized everything based on where they see your ad group, your content themes, and the keywords based on the buckets that they've associated with how they process your site through, their algorithm, a different type of algorithm, arguably maybe a different branch, but still off of the same tree. Taking advantage of the computer learning that is readily available to you from these search engines is, I would make the case that that's the most valuable piece of information that you can use in terms of influencing your campaigns. It's why we keep harping back on keyword research. Why you can talk about all the super advanced technology that goes into semantic search, but it comes down to, again, it's just to reverse engineering what Google is using to be able to qualify and rank results.
And it's interesting where in our industry, there's constant updates of tools. I'm starting to see more tools being updated to reflect the shift to semantic search. That there is a tool called InTopic that tries to replicate this idea of semantic search and tries to replicate what Google is trying to do by looking at pages, by looking at keywords, and replicating the topic and how these different topics relate to each other and how you can most effectively target that. I think Moz is trying to do it. And I think this is a shift it's happening, but it's still something where you can get ahead of the curve if you go ahead and adopt these techniques.
We spent the majority of this episode talking about planning and research to be able to prepare yourself for, the semantic world that we live in. But ultimately, it comes down to execution. And so in our next episode, Nate and I are going to talk about leveraging the principles of semantic search and kind of the new keyword research 2.0, as Nate put it, to be able to help you optimize the content campaigns for your marketing based on, this new evolved understanding of the web.
All right. Well, you can find previous episodes, links to things that we mentioned, and our contact information at bamboochalupa.com. If you don't want to miss part 2 of this series, go subscribe to the podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And while you're there, please leave a comment and rating. We learn a lot from your feedback, and your ratings helps others to discover the show. So for Brett Snyder, I'm Nate Shiver. Thank you for listening.